In 2002, Nike dropped the Mercurial Vapor 1, which at the time wasn't just thinner and lighter than all of its competition, but it was a football boot that, quite frankly, looked like a spaceship in comparison to everything else. And just to give you guys an example of how far ahead of its time the Vapor 1 was, if we compare Nike and Adidas, which everybody likes to do, and keep in mind that back in 2002, Adi definitely would have been the top dog in the football boot industry. Nike has always been a big brand, but they definitely didn't have the market share in regards to football boots that they do now. Either way, these were pretty much their two top-end flagship high-tech football boots, one being the Predator Mania, which is an all-time great, but when you compare that to this, it's pretty crazy. And of course, these are two very different football boots, but if we consider how football boots have evolved since 2002, I think many would still consider the Vapor 1 to be a viable option to wear in today's game, where I think a lot of people would consider the Predator Mania, as amazing as it is, maybe a little bit too bulky and heavy and clunky. It's just not what people are looking for anymore. For the record, I'm not one of those people. And to be fair, this isn't really an apples to apples comparison because this is a speed boot and this is a power boot, but we have to consider where technology and football boots were at this point in time. Nike more or less founded the speed boot category with the original 1998 Mercurial, and then it eventually evolved into what I think is more of the modern silhouette of a speed boot in 2002 with the Vapor 1. But really, up until that point, football boots were relatively simple. The pinnacle in the industry for implementing new design and new technologies for the sake of making a better football boot was the Adidas Predator series, and the Mania, arguably the greatest Predator of all time, was the pinnacle of what they were doing with that concept. But once Nike started to pick up some momentum, let's say, with their speed boot line, obviously Adidas had to answer, and they didn't come up with their own speed boot until 2004, which, as you can see, great boot, but a very long way off the Vapor. As much as I love the OG F50 and the F50 Plus variation that would follow this one up, the F50 series and really a speed boot offering from the Adidas brand wouldn't truly be competitive with the Mercurial series and Nike's speed concept until 2010 with the original F50 Adizero. And if you consider what the speed boot category means to the industry now, it's everything. Every brand makes a speed boot, and I think a big part of the success of the Mercurial line and really establishing the reputation that they have is that for 8 years from the Mercurial Vapor 1, they were the undisputed top dog. Nothing even really came close, which is pretty unheard of these days because when something comes out that's really good, every single brand has an answer almost immediately. That was not the case though through the early and late 2000s. Isn't football boot history fun? So with that mini history lesson out of the way, welcome to the first episode of the reboot of the SR4U Retro Review series, as requested by a lot of you guys over the last several years. This is a series where I take an older football boot, we go over all the details, give a little bit of a history lesson on the boot, and talk about what it represents in football boot history and also how it compares to the boots that we have today. If you guys enjoy this series and want to see it continue on the channel, please support this video with a like. If it gets the support, I'm going to continue the series. If it doesn't, this will probably be the last episode of the reboot. I'm just realizing now that reboot is kind of a pun here. Either way, if you guys want to see this series continue, please support it with a like. And if there is a boot that you'd like to see a retro review of next, let me know what that is down below in the comments. Now, I'm not going to be able to do this with every single retro review, but I do have the original box and accessories with this particular Vapor 1, so I might as well show you. It is the two-tone box that Nike was doing at the time. I really feel like when Nike does these remake colorways, it would be cool if they did the box design that was available at that time. That to me would be a nice little detail. I'll give you guys a quick look at the label as well for those that are interested. But inside the box, they do include a couple of extras. One being because this is actually a soft ground pair of Vapor 1s, and you can see here on the edge of the soft ground studs, which are a little bit unusual in shape, there's a notch, and that notch is to allow you to snap the stud out and then obviously push it back in. And in order to do that, they included this little tool right here, orange in color. You can see it actually says Nike Snap, and then it just has this little kind of metal piece at the end that allows you to stick it in the stud and snap it out, which I'm not going to do for you in this video because I'm very worried about actually cracking the stud or the plastic sole plate, because these are, after all, 18 years old. Which brings us to the exciting part, and something that I don't think I would have done in the original video, and that is give you guys a look at the OG Vapor 1 string bag. Yes, 18 years ago, Nike was still including string bags on their top-end model. This does not match the boots, as you can see. It's just not the same color at all. It's actually this kind of semi-metallic silver, has the Nike swoosh logo. This was like the Nike soccer, Nike football logo at the time. And also, something we rarely ever see, it has the same logo on both sides, NikeFootball.com at the bottom, black strings, and then even has a little pocket on the inside, although I really need to show you guys this specific detail. Take a look at the pull tab on the zipper. It's got this nice kind of aged metal look, and it even has the little Nike logo right there. There's a lot of people that like to argue that the quality of boots has gone down from back in the day, and I would also like to make the argument that the string bag quality has also gone down, because this is really impressive. It gets a string bag rating of 2,083 out of 2,331. So first things first, the look. I think that a lot of boots that I'll be featuring in this series will have a very dated look versus what we have now. The Vapor 1, and honestly a lot of some of the older Mercurials, definitely I think would fit into today's football boot market from an appearance standpoint. This looks just as sleek, if not more sleek, than the modern day Mercurials. I love the simplicity of the design, where you just have the single kind of smaller Nike swoosh through the midfoot that is mirrored on both sides. Then you have this kind of wavy design in terms of just embossed texturing on either side as well, keeping things really simple. Now this is the Cinder colorway, which is kind of like a dark brown, almost bronzy color. It can look black in certain lighting. And if you look really closely, it's got this subtle sparkle to the finish on the upper, a nice matte finish as well, which I'm personally a big fan of in terms of looks. And then it does have the yellow heel liner with this little pull tab here at the top. And this was a Mercurial thing up until the Vapor 3, where they had this little mini fold over tongue, because that was still a thing on football boots at the time. Very difficult to actually get the tongue to stay like that, but you can see when it's like that, the yellow becomes a much bigger part of the design itself. But most of the time when people are wearing them, you'd see the tongue like that. I just like that little shape, that little extension piece. That to me is kind of classic Mercurial. It also has an external heel counter here, which you can see has some of that color changing design that's a little bit more dramatic. It's glossy plastic through the middle, and then matte plastic around the edges that has kind of, it's oxidized a little bit, so it doesn't look quite as good as it perhaps once did. There's a way to fix that, but I don't really want to mess with the boots too much. And then as far as the outsole is concerned, again, it just has more of that kind of color changing pattern. And again, the overall design and aesthetic is still very much modern. As for the boots themselves, you have to really give Nike a lot of credit for seeing what eventually would become popular in the football boot industry, because they launched the speed boot category and really tried to convince consumers that a thinner, lighter, more responsive, more aggressive football boot was the way of the future. And as you can see how speed boots and really how football boots in general have evolved over the years, that was a pretty accurate statement all the way back in 2002. So what we have here with the Vapor 1 was basically Nike's concept of modeling a football boot after a sprinter spike that fit very tightly, offered really thin materials, was obviously extremely lightweight, and Nike in general just wanted to put something out that was totally different than anything else that anyone had on offer, and they did so successfully. And I think what's also interesting about the Vapor 1 is that even though it's now 18 years old, all of the concepts that were introduced on this particular boot, I think are still relevant and a part of the current modern day Mercurial, Vapor 13 or Superfly 7, whichever one you want to compare it to. Now, obviously a big difference in comparison to a lot of boots we have now is that this does not have any needed materials. Instead, the upper is made not out of Teijin synthetic, as I'm sure somebody in the comments has already said. It's actually called Nike Skin. Yes, Nike Skin before this Nike Skin, or this Nike Skin. They like that name a lot. They've used it a lot over the years, even though the material has changed quite significantly. This is very similar to Teijin synthetic, obviously. It's not quite as thin as some of the iterations that we got in the later years. And admittedly, this does feel a lot more plasticky, but But the objective here with Nike Skin and what they were promoting is that this was a thinner and stronger material than kangaroo leather, which back in 2002, that was the material to have on your football boots. If you were buying something high-end, it was made out of K leather, and that was just considered the best. And honestly, it probably was at the time. This, by today's standards, is maybe a little bit plasticky, but I still think that it gets the job done, and there's still a lot of people that really like this type of feel. Certainly not the most comfortable, because there's really not much softness to this, but I think once broken in and once your feet get used to these, because they really do squeeze your feet quite tightly, a lot of people just enjoyed that sensation. And again, it made it different from everything else out there, which is still true with the Mercurial series today. It obviously has a nice deep central lacing system with a tongue. I really like this design personally. And then obviously a super low cut here at the back, where the Mercurial series has always been known for not being the most comfortable, especially in the early days. I think the Vapor 3 and Vapor 4 probably have the worst reputation. Vapor 1 and 2 certainly weren't as comfortable as other boots available at the time. It had a heel liner that is extremely thin. It's got this kind of textured synthetic material with these little grip dots on the inside, as you can see, just to help hold your heel in place. It's just very firm though. You were almost sitting directly against the back of this external plastic heel counter. So again, it took some getting used to, and blisters weren't necessarily the most uncommon thing. Give you guys a quick look at the insole, because I think it's a pretty cool design. You can see it has that super slim profile, really matching the slim profile of the boot. And you can see it says Mercurial Vapor and made in Italy. Back in 2002, and really in the early days of high-end Nike football boots, the fact that they were made in Italy was actually a perk of buying a top-end model. And we're gonna take a closer look at the build quality in just a second, but honestly, the quality is fantastic. Nike does still make some of their football boot releases in Italy, although it just depends on the specific colorway, and sometimes even in the same colorway, you can find them manufactured in different places. I don't think it matters quite that much where they're made anymore based on what I've seen. It does have some pour-on inserts in the heel, as well as the forefoot and big toe, which we really didn't see on Mercurials. I think after Vapor 2, very uncommon these days. They just didn't add any extra cushion. But again, speaking to the build quality, if you look on the inside, look at the stitching and like the craftsmanship. It is as perfect as you'll ever see on a pair of football boots. Really, really impressive. All of the liner, there's not a single crease. Everything is just pretty immaculate. Moving to the sole plate and stud pattern, it has the general appearance of a split sole, although it wasn't a true split sole construction until the Mercurial Vapor 3. But I think that this is a good example of Nike really early on taking advantage of advancements in plastic technology, because not only did this look a lot more modern than what everyone else was doing at the time, it also was significantly lighter. And there is a non-plastic component to this particular sole plate. Not exactly sure 100% what it is, but the feel of the sole plate, and I don't want to bend them too much because you will genuinely crease the upper of these football boots, an issue that we no longer have these days, but it had more of that kind of spring back stiffness effect that so many Mercurials and so many speed boots have these days. This was, again, pretty much the first boot to introduce that type of feel, and it gave you this very responsive, connected sensation to the boots when you had them on your feet. As far as the stud pattern is concerned, this is obviously the soft ground layout, which was kind of unique. Obviously, it's just a 6 stud layout, which was pretty much all soft ground boots at the time. Put an image on screen of what the firm ground layout looked like. That was definitely the most popular amongst the average consumer, I would say. Also, just very, very unique in comparison to everything else out there, and definitely the most aggressive stud pattern I think the world had ever seen up until that point, which again, really got a lot of interest around the Mercurial series, and really everything that this boot did, it did pretty much for the first time. So not only did the Vapor 1 fit more tightly, was more responsive, offered a thinner touch on the ball, and also offered way more aggressive traction than anything we had seen before. Another major appeal of the boot is that it was significantly lighter than everything else. Not just lightest at the time, but the lightest boot the football boot world had ever seen. And I'm gonna weigh them for you, and I hate to pick on the Predator Mania, but it was kind of the boot to have back in 2002. It's what I wanted over the Vapor 1 when I was a kid. Either way, we'll throw it on the scale, and let's keep in mind as well that these are both the soft ground variation, so they're gonna be a little bit heavier than what the firm ground models would have been, and they're also the same size. You can see that these weigh in at 11.2 ounces, the equivalent of 317 grams, which by today's standards would basically make this the heaviest modern day football boot. Take these off the scale and we'll throw on the Vapor 1, and you can see that they weigh in at 6.9 ounces, the equivalent of 195 grams, which If you're keeping track, that is almost half the weight of the Predator Mania, and again, even by modern day standards, that is pretty much the same weight as the current Mercurial Vapor 13 Elite. And if we compare the Vapor 1 to the flagship Mercurial available right now, obviously the Vapor 13 is the better overall football boot. I think most people would agree with that. Are there still some people that would probably rather wear the Vapor 1? I'm sure those people are going to be down in the comments voicing their opinions, but if we're being realistic, this is a superior football boot in quite a lot of ways. But I think what's crazy about these two boots and crazy about the Vapor 1 that came out back in 2002 is that this boot still looks like what Nike is putting out today. If you think about it, there really aren't any other football boots from the early 2000s that look anything like the football boots that are available now. And that, ladies and gentlemen, concludes my retro review of the Mercurial Vapor 1, a football boot that really did change the game. If you guys enjoyed this video and want to continue seeing these reboot episodes of the retro review series, please support this one with a like. That helps me out tremendously. And if you guys have any questions or any suggestions for other boot reviews you'd like to see on the channel, leave that down below in the comments and I'll take a look at everything you guys have to say. If you're not subscribed to the channel already and don't want to miss out on future videos from me, make sure you hit that subscribe button along with the little bell notification so you get notified when the next new video goes live. You can find all my social media information linked down below in the description as well. And other than that, guys, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.